So let's talk about tips. You know, that little extra something you might leave on the table. Or perhaps you hand it directly to someone. It's a bit of money, a gratuity, if you want to be fancy. Customers give these little financial pats on the back, usually for good service. Think about your local restaurant, your favorite coffee shop, the person who cuts your hair, assuming you still have some. These are the traditional tip-receiving zones, the front lines of customer appreciation, or sometimes customer obligation. It's a system, a very American system in many ways. And who are the lucky recipients of these monetary thank yous? Well, it's a whole army of people. We're talking about waiters and waitresses, obviously, bartenders who might be part psychologist, part mixologist, hairstylists who have the power to make you look presentable or like a startled badger, but it doesn't stop there. Think about delivery drivers, braving the elements to bring you pizza in your pajamas. Hotel staff, from the bellhops to the housekeepers, often rely on these extra bits of cash. Essentially, if you're in a job where you're serving the public directly, there's a decent chance tips are part of your world. Now, here's the crucial part. For many of these individuals, tips aren't just a nice little bonus. Oh no, they are a massive, absolutely critical component of their total earnings. In some cases, tips can make up the vast majority of their income. Their hourly wage from their employer might be pitifully low, sometimes even below the standard minimum wage, because the system assumes they'll make up the difference in tips. So, they really, truly depend on the generosity, or at least the customary tipping habits, of the public. It's not pocket money, it's rent money, grocery money, keep the lights on money. And, up until very recently, these hard-earned tips have been treated by the government just like any other income. Yes, that means they're taxable. Your friendly neighborhood waiter gets a $20 tip, and Uncle Sam, in his infinite wisdom and unending need for revenue, expects a slice of that pie. It's reported, it's taxed, and it contributes to the government's coffers. This has been the standard operating procedure for a long, long time. Tips are income, income gets taxed. Simple, right? Well, maybe not so simple anymore because things, as they often do, are changing. Alright, brace yourselves because there's been a development, a rather significant one in fact. The United States Senate has gone and passed something called the No Tax on Tips Act. This isn't a drill, it actually happened. Mark your calendars or don't, I'm not your social secretary, but it was on Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and get this, it passed with a unanimous vote. Unanimous. In today's political climate, getting everyone to agree on the lunch order is a miracle, let alone a piece of tax legislation. So, this is pretty noteworthy. So what's the big idea behind this No Tax on Tips Act? What magical powers does it possess? Well, its primary objective, its raison d'etre if you will, is to eliminate federal income tax on cash tips. Let me repeat that, cash tips. This is an important distinction. If a customer hands over physical dollar bills as a tip, this new law says the federal government doesn't get to take a cut of that for income tax purposes. It's a fairly straightforward concept on the surface, aiming to change how tip income is treated by the taxman, at least for those paper notes. Now you might be wondering, why this sudden urge to make tips tax-free? Where did this idea spring from? Well, it's not entirely out of the blue. The concept gained considerable political momentum and a fair bit of airtime during Donald Trump's presidential campaign. He floated the idea, suggesting that tips should not be taxed, framing it as a way to help service workers. And it seems that idea resonated enough, or perhaps other political calculations were at play, for lawmakers to take it up and push it through the Senate. Politics, folks, it's a strange and wondrous beast. The fundamental purpose, as stated by its proponents, is pretty clear: to allow service industry workers to keep more of the money they earn through tips. If federal income tax is removed from the equation for cash tips, then theoretically that money goes straight into the worker's pocket. More take-home pay, more disposable income. For people who often operate on tight budgets, this could sound like a very appealing prospect indeed. It's presented as a direct financial benefit to a group of workers who are often on the lower end of the pay scale. Let's explore the potential positives, shall we? Because on the face of it, who wouldn't want to pay less tax? The most immediate and obvious advantage of the No Tax on Tips Act is that workers get to keep a larger portion of their cash tips. If a server receives a generous $50 cash tip for handling a particularly demanding table, under this new act, that full $50 is theirs to keep, free from the clutches of federal income tax. That's a tangible, immediate increase in their earnings, which is nothing to sneeze at, especially in an industry known for its fluctuating income streams. more money in the wallet right now. This boost in take-home pay could make a significant difference in the daily lives of many service workers. We're talking about individuals who often juggle multiple bills, trying to make ends meet with wages that can be unpredictable. An extra few $100s a month, untaxed, could mean the difference between struggling and having a bit of breathing room. This could go towards childcare, transportation costs, or even just reducing financial stress. Proponents argue this is a direct injection of cash into the hands of people who are very likely to spend it, thus also stimulating the local economy. It's a direct benefit. Furthermore, some might argue that making cash tips tax-free simplifies the entire tipping process, at least from a certain perspective. Customers might feel better knowing that their entire cash gratuity is going directly to the worker, without any portion being siphoned off by the federal government. It could make the act of tipping feel more like a pure gesture of appreciation, rather than a transaction that also involves a silent tax-collecting partner. This perceived simplicity and directness could even, some hope, encourage more generous tipping, though that remains to be seen, of course. However, and this is a rather large however, like a hippopotamus in a tutu, it's impossible to ignore the potential downsides. One of the most significant concerns being raised, and it's a serious one, revolves around Social Security benefits. Currently, tax tips count as income, which contributes to a worker's Social Security earnings record. If cash tips are no longer considered taxable income, they might not count towards future Social Security benefits. This could lead to substantially reduced retirement income for individuals who have relied heavily on tips throughout their careers. A bigger paycheck today might mean a much smaller and frankly inadequate safety net tomorrow. So, let's delve deeper into these looming concerns, because they are not trivial. That Social Security issue is a particularly thorny one. Imagine working for decades, relying on tips for a significant chunk of your income, only to find out at retirement that your Social Security checks are much smaller than you anticipated because a large portion of your earnings wasn't counted. This isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a potential pathway to old age poverty for a segment of the workforce. It's a trade-off. More cash now, potentially much less security later. This is a serious long-term ramification that needs careful consideration. Then there's the whole question of fairness, which is always a fun topic in politics. Why specifically cash tips? What about tips made via credit or debit cards, which are increasingly common? Are those still to be taxed? If so, this creates an immediate disparity and could incentivize businesses or workers to push for cash payments, which can have its own set of complications like making income harder to track for everyone. And why only service workers who receive tips? What about other low-wage workers in different sectors who don't have the opportunity to earn tips? Is this new law equitable, or does it simply create a new, privileged category of untaxed income? Beyond Social Security and fairness, other potential negative consequences are being flagged by critics and commentators. There's a worry that some employers might see this as an opportunity to reduce base wages further. They could argue that since workers are now receiving tax-free tips, they don't need as high an hourly rate. This would effectively transfer the benefit from the worker to the employer. There are also concerns about the potential for increased underreporting of income if the system heavily favors untaxed cash, potentially leading to a larger shadow economy and reduced overall tax revenue for public services. In summary, the No Tax on Tips Act, recently passed by the Senate on May 20, 2025, aims to eliminate federal income tax on cash tips, an idea supported by figures like Donald Trump. While it promises more immediate take-home pay for service workers, it also brings a cascade of serious concerns, potentially lower Social Security benefits, questions about fairness regarding who benefits and how, and worries about unintended economic consequences. This is a major policy shift. So, the big lingering question is this: what will the true long-term impact of this legislation be for the millions of workers in America who depend on the generosity of strangers? That truly remains to be seen.